Hi everyone, I'm Trish Connor Cato. Welcome to the Access 2021 video course. This video course is for beginners in Microsoft Access, all the way through experienced everyday users looking to sharpen their skills and increase efficiency in Access. Access is Microsoft's relational database application used to organize and store data. Access also has reporting capabilities. So what's covered in this course? We'll start with navigating a completed database while exploring the concept of relational databases and about the objects they contain, including how data is related between tables. While doing so, you'll be learning the Access interface so you become familiar in its environment. Then we dive into how to plan, design, and create databases. We'll start by creating our database tables, and we'll continue by importing table data from Excel as well as manually entering table data. Sorting and filtering techniques will be explored before we move on to exploring table relationships, which are key to a successful relational database. And along the way, I will point out features that are new to this version of Access. If you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe. If you want to earn certificates and digital badges, please become a member of our Patreon. The link is in our video description. If you have any questions you want answered by one of our instructors, please join our off-site community. The link is in the description as well. As always, if this course has exercise files, you'll find them in the video description below. The first module in this course is an introduction into how databases operate. We have several lessons in this module, starting with the introduction. We'll be using an existing database to examine the database objects and to examine table relationships. While we're doing that, we'll be learning the Access interface so you'll become comfortable in its environment. Then we'll move on to creating a new database, and we'll be doing it from scratch. So that involves planning your database. You'll learn about object naming conventions, creating new tables, and importing data from Excel. After that, we'll move on to entering data into tables. You'll learn data entry techniques, as well as how to sort and filter data in those lessons. And then you'll get to use what's known as the relationship window to create relationships between the tables that we create in our new database. We'll move on to creating commonly used queries. We'll be using the query wizard as well as creating them pretty much from scratch using what's known as design view. And then we're going to customize queries with criteria. So you'll learn how to add criteria and also how to use wildcards in criteria. In this module, we're going to use some files that are in your video description. So we have an Excel file called Import into Access. We have 3 Word files, manual data entry, simple cash register instructions, and super duper cash register instructions. You may want to pause the video, grab those files, put them in a folder that's convenient for you on your system. So before we get hands-on in Access, just going to break down the first and second lessons that are in this module. We're going to be doing the lesson 1 and lesson 2 concurrently. So lesson 1 is where we're going to explore an existing relational database. We're going to use a pretty popular database that's out there. It's like a customer orders and products database. It's called the Northwind database, and we can actually access it from within Microsoft Access, which will be the first thing we do when we switch over to the application. So we're going to explore that database by examining its objects and also how data is related between tables. Now, when it comes to database objects, you have 6 of them. Your tables are the only object that stores your data. So tables are pretty important in Access. It's the only place that holds your data. Then we have queries. Queries are used to ask questions of data. For example, I want a list of my customers that are in New York. That would be a query. Forms can be used for multiple purposes in Access. They can be used for data entry or to display information to the user. And as we go through the course, you'll see that there are specialized forms that are often used in Access. Reports can be distributed. An example of that would be maybe you have upper management that don't use Access, but they want reporting on the data in a variety of ways from the database. So those reports can be distributed in a number of ways. Macros, you may be familiar with them from recording macros in Excel. They automate tasks, but that's the only similarity between Access macros and Excel macros. In Excel, you're recording what you're doing into a macro. In Access, you don't record your steps, you actually build the macro. But in either case, they are designed to automate commonly repetitive tasks. Modules store the same thing, except it's different. They also automate tasks, but using Visual Basic for Applications language, also known as VBA, to write some code to help you automate tasks. So modules in Access are actually more powerful than macros. We'll be integrating Lesson 2, Learning the Access Interface, along with our exploration in Lesson 1 of the Northwind database. And we'll do that by exploring the Access ribbon tabs, using the Access navigation pane, and using Data View and Design View of a database object. So let's get ready to go ahead and switch over to Microsoft Access. A lot of times when you're interested in starting a new database, you can look at the wide variety of templates that are built into Access. And so we're going to use a template to gain access to this Northwind database. On my system, because I've accessed it before, I see it right up here. So when you go into Access, you're on the Home tab, and it's showing up right up here under New for me. If it's not showing there for you, you can click on the More Templates link, and you can scroll through, and you'll notice a couple of things. They have different categories of templates that you can use, or you can simply scroll through any of them. So, for example, let's say you're tasked with a job of tracking all the assets for your department or your company. You might want to start with the asset tracking template. Now, there may be some changes you need to make to it to make it work for you, but at least that way you don't have to start from scratch. So instead of scrolling through, we can use the Search for Online Templates box up here and just type Northwind. It is all one word, and press Enter. And you should come up with the Northwind template. You're going to click on it one time, and you'll notice that it gives you an informational box over here on the right about what type of database it is. Because you're not actually impacting the template, it literally makes a copy of the template and it gives it a temporary file name. In your case, it might be database 1. Mine, it's database 3. And I'm going to just click where it says database 3, and I'm going to type my Northwind. It gives me the path of where it wants to place this database. And I'm going to use the file folder to browse for a location to put it. I want it in my working directory where I have all of the files for this course that are provided to you in the video description. So I'm going to browse to that directory. And once I do that, you'll see here that it retains the name that we put in, My Northwind. So I'm going to just click OK. And now I'm going to click on create. So in Access, you want to name your item first instead of doing like a save afterwards. You could do a save afterwards and give it a name, but Access works a little bit different in this regard as compared to some of the other Office apps. So it's getting your template ready for you. And the first thing I'm going to have you do when you get in is clear the security warning, the yellow band at the top, by clicking Enable Content. The first thing that happens when you enable content is you have this login dialog form that pops up. It's programmed so that when this database is opened, it gives you the login dialog form. And you'll notice this is a sample, right? It has a drop down and you can select different people off of the list. We're going to just leave it on Andrew Sensini, the first employee on the list, and go ahead and click the login button so it takes you into the database. Now, this is another form that pops up. So it's designed, so for this person, Andrew Sensini, it's showing active orders. It's showing inventory to reorder. And on the right side, you have a series of quick links that would lead Andrew to view inventory, view orders, view all of these different things. So a pretty slick form that pops up after the login form. Now, this form also allows Andrew to start a new customer order or a new purchase order. You'll also notice that in the inventory to reorder section, these are links for product names. So if I click on the first one, Northwind Traders Boysenberry Spread, it opens up yet another form that shows me the product details for that. So it's showing me everything about that particular product on that form. And I can use the X to close that form, or I can use the close link right here to close that form. So two forms happen when you go into the Northwind database. You get your login form, and then you get what's known as the home form that comes up and can be utilized to go to different parts of the database. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the left side of the screen. You'll notice on the left side of the screen, it's collapsed right now, but it says navigation pane over here on this left side of the screen. Above the text, you'll see the double arrows, and you can use that to expand the navigation pane. And once it's expanded, if I want to make it wider, I do have a separator bar between the navigation pane and the home form, and I'm going to just extend it. Now, this navigation pane has been customized. You'll learn how to customize the navigation pane later in the course, but for right now, we want to change it to its default view. So at the very top, to the right of where it's saying actually Northwind Traders there, you'll see that little drop down arrow. And you can utilize that to get to different ways of viewing this, right? So Northwind Traders is the customization view that we're looking at right now. And we want to go to the default view. So we're going to click on Object Type. So if you don't have a customization, this is what it would default to, where it has all the different database objects listed by type. So if I expand tables, I'll see all of the different tables that are in this database. And I can collapse it by using the reverse double arrow. There's a bunch of queries in this database that have already been created, as well as forms, reports, macros, and modules. So let's examine the table database object. So when I expand the tables group again, the first table that's listed, and you'll notice they're in alphabetical order in their grouping, is the customers table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on it. So now it's taken me to the customers table. Now, we never close that form, right? The home form. So if you notice at the top here, you have a tab for both the home form and you have one for the customers table, which is the active one. So the customers table looks very similar to an Excel spreadsheet. This is known as data sheet view, right? So you have a row which contains a record of information, and your columns are the fields in the table, right? So row 1 is a record for this company named Company A, gives you contact information, email address, if any, job title, so on and so forth. And you can scroll across to see any additional information that's contained in that table. Now, if I right click on the Customers tab above the table, the only other view for a table is Design View. So let's click in Select Design View. And we can just do yes if you get this message that pops up. So Design View, this is typically the view I work in when I'm creating a new table, Design View. And you'll learn more about Design View when we start to create our own database. Now, we can close that table tab by using its X, or you can right-click on either the Home or the Customer Table tab, and you can choose Close All. And that's the choice I'm going to make. So now we have no open objects, and we can collapse tables in the navigation pane. Go ahead and expand queries. So we're going to take a look at a query. It's named Product Category Sales by Date. And if you right-click on the query in the navigation pane, it says that you can open it or you can open it in Design View. So opening is the same as double-clicking it. So I'm going to go ahead and select Open. And again, this is kind of like Data Sheet View. Looks like an Excel spreadsheet. So here's our asking a question of the database. We want to see product category sales by date. So we have our categories on the right, the dates on the left, and the sum of the quantity in the middle. Now I'm going to right click that product category sales by date tab. And you'll notice that we have, once we're in it, we have Design View and SQL View available to us. So Data Sheet View is what would happen if you double click it or you choose Open when you right click it in the navigation pane. Let's take a look at Design View. And you'll get comfortable working in this view during this course. We're going to create queries by using a wizard. We're also going to create queries in Design View. So you'll learn more about Design View later on. And we can right click on the tab again, and we can go to SQL View. When you create a query, either in Design View or by using the Query Wizard, it creates SQL scripting code. So SQL is structured query language, right? You get, by default, Access generating SQL language for you whenever you create a query. So this is what that query would look like if you wrote it in SQL. You could also go to this view and create a query if you know SQL scripting. You can just type it in, similar to what it says here. The only difference between doing it in Access and doing it in like SQL Server Management Studio is you have to end your query with a semicolon when you're doing it in Access. And that would cause an error if you did that in SQL Server Management Studio. So you literally have 3 different views for a query. You have Data Sheet View, Design View, and SQL View. And you can go ahead and close that query. So now I'm going to collapse the queries category and expand forms. And the second form that we were on was called the home form. So let's go ahead and double click on home. And that's what we saw when we got past the login form when we first got into Northwind. And if you right click on the home tab, you'll see that forms have 3 different views. So what we're looking at right now by double clicking is form view. This view can be used to input new information, to make edits to your form, so on and so forth. Let's take a look at layout view. Now in layout view, you'll notice it puts borders around each of these objects, right? So there's a border around this object here. And you can change the width of things. You can move stuff around when you're in layout view. The benefit of doing it in layout view is you're actually seeing the underlying data. Let's right click on the home tab again and go to design view. So design view, you can create your form in design view. You can manipulate your form objects in design view. The only thing is you're not seeing underlying data when you're in this view. You're just seeing the field names and their labels, so to speak. And we can close the home form. Now we'll collapse the forms category and expand reports. We're going to focus on a report called Top 10 Biggest Orders. We can right click on it and you'll see it has open, layout view, and design view. Let's go ahead and choose open, which is the same thing you would get if you were to double click on it. So it shows the report. If someone were viewing it on their screen, this is the view that they could use. Let's right click on the Top 10 Biggest Orders tab. And this is known as report view, so viewing it on the screen. Let's take a look at layout view. Layout view in a report is very similar to layout view in a form in that you can reorganize stuff in layout view and you're seeing the underlying data. Let's right click again and go to design view. Again, you can create the report in this view. You can manipulate the way things look in this view. The difference between design and layout view, again, is that in design view, you're not seeing the underlying data. And we have another view, right click again, and we have print preview. So if you're going to send a report or you want to email it or you want to print it, you can come into print preview. You'll notice when you're in print preview, the ribbon just has the file tab and print preview. So you can change the paper size, the margins, so on and so forth, your page layout. And then you have a whole data category over here toward the right where you can look at it in like Excel, export it as a text file, a PDF. You can email it from here, and you actually have a more drop down that you can access in that group too. So if you want to export it to rich text format in Word or XML or HTML, you can do all of that from preview view. You can also close print preview by using the last button on that ribbon tab, and it takes you back into design view. And we can go ahead and close the report by using the X on its tab. So now let's expand macros. And you can see there are 2 macros in this Northwind database. One is named AutoExec and the other delete all data. So if you wanted to delete all the data from the database, you could use that macro. An AutoExec macro is a specialized type of macro. You can only have one AutoExec macro per database, and it has to be named AutoExec. You can't change the name. It has to be named exactly like it is there. And AutoExec macros execute whenever the database opens. So When we opened this database, the login form executed. It showed up on the screen. And that is a result of that auto exec macro. If I double click the macro or right click on it and choose run, it will bring up that login dialog box. And I'm going to close that dialog box. So again, it happens whenever the database is open. The first thing that popped up was the login dialog box. If I right click on auto exec again and I go to design view, you'll see the steps that is used in this macro. I mentioned earlier with macros in Access, you build the macro. It's not recording your steps that you do like in Excel. You actually build the macro. So it's telling it, if I'll just break this down into plain English, if this file is not trusted, right, then it's going to open up a form called the startup screen. If it is trusted, it's going to open up the login dialog. So in this case, this is a trusted project. You'll learn more about security and stuff later. But so that's why it opened the login dialog that we saw. And we can close the auto exec macro tab. Last but not least, we're going to explore a module in here. So we have several different modules in the Northwind database. Let's right click on the customer orders module and choose design view. So this takes you into a whole different window, Microsoft Visual Basic for Applications, VBA, and this is the VBA code that was created for that module. Now, you're going to learn just a brief bit of Visual Basic for Applications during this course. But one thing you should know is that for a lot of people that don't know Visual Basic for Applications, you can create macros and then convert them into Visual Basic for Applications code. So I'm going to close this window. I'm going to the top X in the upper right-hand corner to close out of Visual Basic. So now I'm going to go ahead and collapse macros, modules, and my reports categories. And I'm going to expand tables again. And let's go back to the customers table, and I'm going to just double click it. So we're looking at it in datasheet view. And if you look up at the ribbon, because we have a table open, we get two contextual tabs on the ribbon at the end of the ribbon. So we have a table fields tab and we have a table tab. And that's only because we've opened this table. So if I close the table using the X on the tab, those two tabs disappear from the ribbon. When I open the table again by double clicking, they reappear. So you get contextual tabs throughout Microsoft Office products, but just wanted to show you how the ribbon will change in Access as well. So if we go to the Home tab of the ribbon that has your normal clipboard group and sort and filter and a records group, all of that kind of stuff, text formatting. You also have a Create tab, which you're going to get acquainted with during this course. You have an External Data tab, which you will get acquainted with during this course. Database Tools, these are your basic ribbon tabs. And you'll learn how to use certain items on this tab as well during this course. You have Help, where you can get help, you can get in touch with support, you can give feedback, so on and so forth. And in addition to your Help tab on the ribbon, you have your Tell Me What You Want to Do, so you can search for different things. So here on my list, I have Switchboard Manager here, and it tells me it wants to launch it for me. And you'll learn how to create a switchboard, which is a specialized form, later in the course. I'm going to click No. So tell me what you want to do can take you to an area of the program that you may have forgotten how to get to that you need to use. So that's the main ribbon tabs that you have here in Access. You've already learned how to navigate in the navigation pane. You've already learned how to close object tabs by either right-clicking and choosing Close or Close All, or just using the X in the upper right-hand corner to close the tab, which I'm going to do with that customers table right now. The other thing you have at the bottom is a status bar like in the other Office programs. So all the way at the bottom of the screen in the gray band where it says ready, that is your status bar. And if I right click in a blank area of the status bar, these are all the things that I can see in the Access status bar. So for example, my num lock is on, right? And so over to the right of my status bar, you see the text there saying that num lock is on. If I turn the caps lock on my keyboard, then I get that notification also to the right of the status bar that my caps lock is on. So let's go back to the Database Tools tab on the ribbon while we're still in the My Northwind database. And on that tab, you'll see there's a relationships group. And in that group, you have a relationships button. So the way that relational databases work is you have multiple related tables in your database. So before we go into the relationships window, if I expand tables again, you'll see that I have customers table, I have employees table, I have orders details, order details tables, products. So each table stores a specific bit of information that's related to other tables, right? And you'll learn that in the next lesson when we get ready to start creating our own database. You'll get more insight into that. But for right now, the relationships between the tables control a lot of things. So if it keeps you from having to repeat information. So your customers table just holds customer information. Your orders table holds orders information. They're related through a common field. And again, you'll learn more detail on that shortly. But for right now, let's just look at the relationships that are in this My Northwind database. So we're going to click on the relationships button, and I'm going to move my separator back over so I see more relationships. So it looks crazy, doesn't it? Right? So let's just look at the relationship between customers table and the orders table. First of all, no matter where I move the table tile to, the relationship stays intact. But if you look at the line between customers and orders, you'll see that it has a 1 on one side of the line, the side closest to the customers table, and then it has an infinity symbol on the other side of the line closest to the orders table. That means it's a one-to-many relationship. And again, you'll get more information on that shortly. So one customer can have many orders. That's what it's saying. And the common field between those tables, and I'm going to expand I'm going to just do the width of the orders table a little bit so I can see the field names. So this ID field in the customers table, it is the customer ID, okay? And that is mirrored in the orders table. So that's the common field that's relating both of those tables. So you don't have to do duplicate information. In the orders table, it knows which customer's information it's accessing because of the customer ID field. So again, when we create our database, you're going to actually learn more about relationships because you're going to have to create them. So on the on the ribbon now, while we're in relationships, we're on the Relationships Design Contextual tab, and the last button on that tab is Close. So if I move my mouse or any table tiles around, it's going to prompt me to save my changes. I'm going to just say no and close that relationships window. And further to that, we can go ahead and close the My Northwind database. So I'm going to just click on the File tab of the ribbon and close. So you want to remain in Access, but you don't have anything open in Access at this point. Now that we've explored the Northwind database and you got to see the different database objects, how to use the navigation pane in default view, we're getting ready to create our own database without using a template. We're going to create one from scratch. And before we do that, just want to give you some background information. So you want to plan a new database. You just don't want to open access and start building a database without having a plan. The most important thing is figuring out what is its business purpose. And once you find the answer to that question, you would want to confer with colleagues who will be also utilizing the database to get their input. And then you'll need to determine who is actually going to use the database and how will those users be trained. So 4 key steps. I mean, if you have users that are used to working in Access databases, that's great, but this might be a new experience for them, so they'll have to be trained on how to use the database. Now, we did not see an example of object naming conventions in the Northwind database. I am a stickler for this kind of thing, and I continuously use the appropriate object naming prefixes when I'm working with database objects. And you'll see on this slide, I have some examples. So the 3-character prefix for tables is TBL, and typically the table name is plural. So TBL customers. If it's more than one word, it would be an example, TBL products information. And notice the words are mushed together with initial capital letters, except for the lowercase prefix. The reason why I use the prefix, if I'm looking at my database objects in a list of some sort, typically I may use the same name for different objects. So we have queries, and I could have a table named TBL customers, but I could also have QRY customers, which immediately lets me know it's a query. FRM customers, it's a form. RPT for reports. MCR for macros, and MOD for modules. Now, often you'll see that macros and modules don't have the prefix, but I definitely make sure that I use a prefix on tables, queries, forms, and reports. I'm also going to review now what we're going to cover in lesson 4, and then we're going to go back to Access and get started on this. So once we create our database, we're going to start designing and creating new tables. So there are planning steps for database tables, and we're going to create tables in design view. And in terms of populating tables, we can do manual data entry, and we can also import data from Excel. When I learned how to plan database tables, I learned to think of a database as a multi-subject planner that has one overall topic. So this would be like the database that we're going to create is going to be similar to Northwind in theme, and that it's really going to be about customers, their orders, and things of that nature, products. So a multi-subject planner for one topic, and then you have related subjects, which are the different tables. Each table should cover one topic. So a customers table, an employees table, a products table. And what makes it into a relational database is that you have related fields in the tables, and you'll use the relationships window to create the relationships for your database tables. One thing you want to do is plan your tables on paper first. And when you're planning your tables, think of what you want to name the table as well as what fields are going to be in the table. And you want to break your fields down to their lowest form. So in other words, you don't want just an address field, one address field in, say, for example, a customer's table. You might perhaps want to have address 1, address 2, city, state, zip, broken down like that. If you have it all in one field, it will not be easy to sort for your customers in New York or your customers in California in any kind of order, or filter for those state designations either. And before you build your tables, you want to review your table plan. What I like to do is I like to give my table plan to an uninterested party to review. Sometimes we work in silos. So we might have a lot of acronyms that we use, but anybody that doesn't know what they stand for is going to have problems understanding what you're talking about. So I like to make sure it's clear so that if new people are coming in, they'll be able to use the database, so on and so forth, without having to seek out clarity about what does this heavily acronymed field even represent. So I like an uninterested party to review my table plan and tell me if the field names make sense to them. So now we're going to create our new database from scratch. And we're going to do that by going to the File tab. And if you're on Home, you should see Blank Database up here. But if you do not, you can go to New, and you'll definitely see it there. So we want to click on Blank Database one time. And we can name it here, or we can navigate to the directory where we're going to save it first and then name it there. Let's do that. So I'm going to browse to that location. And when I get to that location, I am going to name it Customer Orders. And I'm going to click OK. So now I can go ahead and click the Create button. And when you start with a new blank database, it gives you one table with one field in it. It names that table, Table 1, and it gives it an ID field. It also opens the table in Datasheet View. That's all it gives you when you create a new database from blank. So we could create our table in Datasheet View, but I actually prefer to create my tables in Design View. So what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on the Table 1 tab and switch to Design View. At this point, it's going to want us to name the table. So we're going to use the table prefix of TBL in all lowercase. And then we're going to do a capital C and spell out the rest of customers. So TBL customers, plural. And we're going to click OK. It saved the table and it put us in Design View. Now, the reason why I like to work in Design View versus Datasheet View is it actually gives you a few more options, and I think it's an easier view to work in. So the first field that it gave us, it only gave us one in this table, is an ID field. Well, I like to be more specific with the field name. So since this is the customer's table, I'm going to go in front of ID, and I'm going to just rename that field to Customer ID. Now, let me just explain why there is a symbol of a key in the row header for that field. you'll see that little key right above where I was trying to point with my pointer. Let me do this again. So you will see a tiny little key in that row header. That means it is a primary key field. Now, this is terminology you should know about at this point. A primary key is a field in a table that forces every record in the table to be unique. So if I have a customer ID of 01 or the number 1, there and if they have the same name, address, and other data as another customer that has a customer ID of 15, they are not duplicate records. Each of those is unique because they have a different customer ID. So a primary key field forces each record in the table to be unique. And so we're going to use the auto number data type here. Now, this means that we don't have our own customer IDs that we've been using. Access will create them for us, and it will, every time we enter a new customer record, it will give it the next sequential number. So 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. And we're happy with this field right now. We don't need a description. Notice it says that a description is optional. We'll go down to the next field name cell. So our next field name here is going to be company name. And I'm using initial caps, but I'm not separating the words at this point. And for that one, if we tab over to data type, you'll notice it will default to short text. So short text allows you a maximum of 255 characters in the field. If you go to the data type drop down, you'll see the other data types that you have available in Access. So long text would be something like if you want a notes field where you need a large amount of text. You have number and large number, date time. Date time extended data type is new in this version of Access. So date time extended matches up with SQL long date formats. You have currency auto number, which we discussed. It will assign sequential numbers for you. Yes, no, that typically presents as a checkbox. Olay object, hyperlink attachment, calculated. And then you have the lookup wizard, which is a way to link tables to each other, as you'll see later in the course. So we're going to leave this on short name. And for this one, we'll put in a description and we'll just say customer company name. Now the description will show up in the status bar if records are being entered in datasheet view, or even if you create a form based off of a table, the description will show in the status bar of the form. And it's really good for fields that need some more detail, especially for new users to the database. So they'll be able to look down at the status bar and see what's expected. We're going to go to our next field. So I'm going to have you complete the rest of the fields just for the customer table. All of them except the last 3, email, active, and employee, all of them will have the short text data type. So email, you want to use hyperlink, active, yes, no, and employee number, but otherwise you're going to do short text. So go ahead and finish entering these fields in the customer table. And when you're done, your screen should look like this. We're going to come back in here momentarily, add a few more descriptions for certain fields, and we're going to deal with some field properties. So we're going to add a description for both the active field and the employee field. I'm going to go to the active description cell and type, is the customer currently active? Question mark. Again, that will show in the status bar, in datasheet view, also in form view if we're referencing the table from a form. And then for the employee description, we're going to choose, please select an employee from the list. Now, we don't have a list yet, but we will have one, and you'll see how that works a little bit later. If you'll notice on the bottom half of this screen, we've been working on the top half, right? The bottom half of the screen, you have field properties. And there's actually two different tabs down there. You have a general tab and you have the lookup tab. We're going to focus on the general tab right now. So the properties will change depending on the data type of a field. So let's do this. In the upper half, let's click anywhere within the row where the state field is. And you'll notice on the bottom half, you're seeing the field properties. So it's a short text field. It can have a maximum field size of 255 characters. We are going to make that field size 2. We're going to force it so that it's a 2-character state abbreviation that we want used. So we're going to change the field size to 2 down in the field properties panel. The other thing we want to do with our state field is we want to change its format property. That's the next property under field size. And what you're going to do there is you're going to put a greater than symbol. That says, regardless of how the user types in this 2-character state abbreviation, if they type it in lowercase, it's going to force it into uppercase. So we want consistency in our database tables. We don't want some users typing out, for example, California, the entire state name, or abbreviating it to CALIF, period. We want consistency. So no matter how it's typed in, it will be formatted to 2 characters in uppercase. The next field we want to adjust a property for is the phone field. So I'm going to select that field in the upper half of the screen. And what we want to do is we want to put an input mask on the phone field. So it will make all the phone numbers that are input have the same formatting. You know, sometimes people put the area code in parentheses. Sometimes they don't, and they put a dash between the area code and the first 3 numbers. Again, we want consistency in our database. So when you use an input mask, the end user only types in the raw numbers and access will apply the formatting. So when you click in the input mask property, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go all the way over to the right side and you will see an ellipsis button. Now you could type in the input mask, but you need to have some practice doing that. It really is easier to use the wizard initially, and that's what we're going to do when we click the ellipsis, is we're going to access the input mask wizard. So it's going to tell you that you have to save your table first. We already gave it a name, so you're going to save it now, and it opens the input mask wizard. So the phone number wizard is what we want. That's the input mask that we want. So it's already selected. Down at the bottom, we're going to choose next. And so you'll see the actual input mask here, or actually part of it here in this screen. So it has an exclamation point, and then in parentheses, 3 nines. The nines represent an optional number. So it's not requiring that an area code is written in or typed in. It can be optional. The area code can be optional. If the area code is not entered, the exclamation point is saying, start the numbers on the right side so you don't end up with the first 3 digits of the phone number in the parentheses. That'll look really messed up. What we want to do here is we want to change it. We want the area code to be required. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the exclamation point because we won't need it anymore. And we're going to change those nines in the parentheses to zeros. So we want inside the parentheses, instead of 3 nines, we're going to want 3 zeros. Get those in there. And it might be in overtype mode, so you're going to be typing over the nines instead of insert mode. So the placeholder character in the field, we're not going to change it. We'll leave it on the underscore. You'll see how that looks when we are done here. So now we're going to do next. And we have one question to answer here. And this only applies to if you're going to be exporting the data to, say, Excel or something. Do you want to export it with the symbols in the mask so it looks like a formatted phone number, or without the symbols? I always choose with the symbols in the mask. We're going to do next and then finish. So now if you look at that input mask, what's in there, if you were going to type it in, that's how you would have to type it, with every backslash, every double quote, every dash. So again, it can be easier to use the wizard. And we're going to right click on our table tab and save it. Let's right click on our table tab and go to Datasheet View. And if you notice, and I'm going to just expand the width of the company name column. So whatever the field name is what's going to show as a column heading. Now there's a property that you can use to change that. It won't change the field name. It will just change the way it shows, like in a column heading here. And that is the caption property. So let's go back to Design View. On the upper half, click anywhere in the company name field. In your field properties panel, you want to click in the caption field property box. And in there, you're going to type it in plain English, company space name. And then go ahead. And another way you can switch between views here, I should point this out. When we're in table design, you're on the table design tab of the ribbon. And the first button is view. So you can use that button to switch back and forth between design and datasheet view as well. So when I click on Datasheet View here, because I made a change, it's going to prompt me that I have to save the table. So I'm going to say yes. And now we can see company name is displaying its caption and not the actual field name there as it was before. So the caption will change the way the field name is displayed, but the actual field name is still company name, all mushed together. So now we're going to create an employees table, and I'm going to get you started on it, and then I'll put the slide up with the fields that you're going to want in the table and their data types. So this time we're going to leave the customers table open, and we're going to go to the Create tab on the ribbon, and we want to do it in Table Design View. So in the Tables group, you're going to click on Table Design. So this one doesn't give you any fields, right? It just gives you a blank table in Design View. So the employee table field names is on the bottom half of the slide. The employee ID field is going to be auto number, and the remaining 3 fields are going to be short text. Now, let me talk about that for a minute. Extension is going to be their phone extension, right? It's going to be numbers. But in Access, you don't make a field a number field unless you might want to do a calculation on that field, typically. So we're not going to be doing a sum of extensions. Now, in our customer table, we made the employee field, which is going to map to the employee ID field in the employee table. We made that a number field because if employee ID is auto number, when it's referenced in another table, you can't also make it auto number or it creates a conflict. So you have to make it number. But in most cases, a number field is a number that you plan to do calculations on. So employee ID is going to be auto number, and the remaining 3 fields are going to be short text. Go ahead and build out that employee table, and you're going to name it TBL Employees. When you're done, your screen should look like this. I haven't saved it yet, so I'm going to just right-click on the Table 1 tab and save. And like I said, it's going to be TBL. We're using the prefix here, employees. And it lets me know that there is no primary key defined. Okay, so when we created the customers table, we didn't create that from scratch. When we created our blank database, it gave us that table. And it also gave us an ID field, which it made it primary key field. So it's asking you, do you want to create a primary key now? I'm going to say no on this one. Now, Access doesn't really care, but you should care. I didn't want it to do it for us, so that's why I said no. We want to make the employee ID field the primary key field. And again, we're using auto number, so each employee ID will be unique in the table. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to just right-click on the employee ID row heading, and I'm going to choose primary key by clicking it, and it puts that key icon there. I also could have clicked anywhere in the employee ID row and clicked on primary key in the tools section of the table design ribbon. But either way, we now have a primary key field for this table as well. We are just going to adjust one field property, and that's for the extension field. We're going to give it a field size, your first field property on the bottom. We want to make it 4. In our mythical company, we only have 4-digit extensions on our phone lines. And we can take a look at it in Datasheet view. It's going to prompt you to save. It only prompts you for design changes. And we decide that we want to caption last name and first name so they're not mushed together. So I'm going to go back to design view and use your caption field property for both last and first name to make it into 2 separate words. And once you're done, you can go ahead and save, and you can take a look at it again in Datasheet view so you can see your captions. So moving on in this module, we're getting ready to manually enter data into a table. We're only going to enter a couple of records. And then you're going to learn some other data entry shortcuts and techniques that we'll use to populate the tables that we created, as well as to create new tables that are already populated. After that, we'll learn how to sort and filter our table data in Access. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we'll close our customers table and we'll leave our employees table in Datasheet view, and we're going to enter just a couple of employee records here. I'll walk you through what they are. So since our employee ID is set to auto number, even if we wanted to put something in there, it wouldn't let us save the record. It's going to take care of that. So we're going to click in the first last name field, and we're going to just type Jones. and I use my tab key to go over to first name. Now, as soon as you type Jones, it gave you the employee ID of 1. And also I want to point out, if you look in the row header here, it is showing a pencil icon, and that means that that row is being edited. In Access, you don't have to save your work in terms of the data that you're putting into a table. You have to save table design items, but when you exit the row and the pencil icon disappears, that's when that record is saved. So this person's first name is Vicky with a Y, and their extension is 1001. And then I'm going to go to the next last name field, and we're going to type Brewster, and it's Joey, and his extension is 1002. And I'm going to use my down arrow now just to exit that row and get rid of the pencil so that these two records are now saved in my database. And let's go ahead and do the X to close the employees table. And then if you double click it in your navigation pane, you'll see that your records are still there. You can close it again. Now, we just entered 2 records directly into a table. Normally, you wouldn't be doing that. Normally, you would populate your table data a different way. If you're doing manual data entry, you'd probably want to be doing it from a form rather than within the table itself. But we're going to populate the customers table and the rest of the employees table by using data that's already stored in Excel. So now that we manually entered 2 records in the employees table, we're going to populate the table from an Excel file that you grabbed from the video description called Import into Access. So that file doesn't need to be open right now. It just needs to be in a directory that you can get to easily. And what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the External Data tab on the ribbon. And you'll notice there's just 2 groups on this tab. There's your import group, import and link group, and there's an export group. Well, we're interested in importing data into Access tables from an Excel spreadsheet. So we'll be working in the import and link group by going to the new data source dropdown, hovering over from file, and you'll notice here you have Excel, HTML, XML, text file. You could also bring in data from another Access database from SQL Server. There's other online services like from a SharePoint list and other sources. So we're going to hover over from file and we are going to choose Excel. So what you need to do is you need to browse to wherever you put that import into Access file from the video description, and you're going to double click it. Now we have choices at the bottom. So we could import the source data into a new table in the current database, which we're not going to do because we already have an existing table. We want to append a copy of the records to the table, and then over to the right, do the drop down and select TBL employees. Your other option here is link to the data source by creating a link table, and you'll learn about linked tables later in this video course. So we're going to keep it on the second choice, append, and we're going to click OK. Now on this screen at the top, it's showing the worksheets that are in that Excel file. If you had named ranges in the file, you could show them, but we're going to show the worksheets. We have worksheets for all of the tables that we're going to ultimately want to have. We already have our customer and employees tables defined, but we don't have any data in them. So if you click on employees for your table, you'll see the employee ID starting with employee ID 3 because we entered employee ID 1 and 2, right? And you have the rest of their information that we're importing here. So at the bottom, we're going to click on Next. And it just shows us, it already detected that the first row contains column headings. So that's already been promoted there. We're going to do Next again. And it's asking us to verify which table we're importing into. And it's on TBL employees. So we can click on Finish. Now, if this is an import that you're going to be doing frequently, you could save the import steps. In our case, we're not going to do that. We're going to just do Close. And now if you double click your TBL employees, you'll see that in addition to Vicki Jones and Joey Brewster, it brought in the other employees and their extensions from that Excel file. And we didn't have to type it in. So this is a data entry shortcut. If you already have the data in an existing format, you don't have to retype it into Access. And we're going to close that employees table. Now we're going to bring in data from the customers table. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in Excel before we do that. Now we're going to use the same process to import the data for the customers table into Access. And we didn't manually enter any customers, so we'll be able to get this whole data set here imported in. Now with this one, we may get an error upon import, and I want to explain why before we do it. If you notice a couple of fields, if you notice here, our employee column is listing employee names. We set it up in ours as a number field. So not a short text field as it would be here, but a number field. And that's because you're going to learn how to use a lookup from one table to another later in this course. So we'll probably get an error here when we go to import this, but it's one of those errors that will scare you. But if you just go through it, it won't do anything negative. So I want to point that out before we get it in here. And so I'm going to go ahead and close this file. And so back in Access, I'm going to do the same process on the External Data tab. I'm going to go to New Data Source, from File, Excel. I'm going to navigate to that same file and double click it. We're going to choose the Append option again. And this time we're going to leave it on TBL customers. That drop down, they would be in alphabetical order on that drop down. So we're going to leave it on TBL customers. The table already exists, and we're going to click OK. And now when we're showing worksheets, we want to be looking at the customers worksheet there. And we're going to do Next. And Next again. It's just verifying the table that you're importing to, and we're going to do Finish. And this is where it's going to give us this error message, right? Access was unable to append all the data to the table. If records were lost, either the records you pasted contain primary key values that already exist, or they violate referential integrity, all of this stuff, right? The asterisk above that one is the one that applies here. If data was deleted, the data you pasted or imported doesn't match the field data types or the field size property. That's kind of like it, right? Because we do have that different data type there. So all of this to say, I just want to prepare you for this happens. We made the employee for our customers table a number data type, and in the actual Excel file, it's a text data type. So that's why we're getting this error. Do you want to proceed anyway? We're going to say yes. We're not going to save the import steps here, so we're going to just close. And when we open the customers table by double clicking it, you'll see that everything was brought in except for the employee, because it's a different data type than what we defined in our table structure. So, error message that may scare the boots off of you, but at the end of the day, it'll bring in most of your information. And we're going to get this fixed later in the course when we link this table to the employees table to get that information. So go ahead and close your customers table. So we have more information, more table data information to bring in from that Excel file. And we're going to do a slightly different process this time because we haven't created these tables already in Access. So we're going to go back to our new data source from File, Excel. We're going to navigate to that same Import into Access file. And this time we're going to leave it on the first choice, import the source data into a new table in the current database. Now it gives you good information there. If the specified table does not exist, Access will create it. If the specified table already exists, Access might overwrite its contents with the imported data. Changes made to the source data will not be reflected in the database. So in our case, Access is going to create the table for us, and it's going to bring in the data to the table. So we're going to click OK at the bottom. And this time we're going to start. We already have our customers and employees table done. We're going to start with categories. So we're going to click on categories. We're going to do next. Here it lets us get to first row contains column headings. If we wanted to uncheck that, we would, but we don't. And we're going to do next. Now here we get a different screen that we haven't seen before. So the thing is, it gives you the name of the field, whether it's indexed, and you'll learn about that a little bit later, and the data type as it is in Excel. And the only other option you have here is do not import the field. So if you wanted to skip a field or fields from a table, you can simply check do not import this field. So I normally deal with the data types in Design View after I get them all of the data into Access. So we're going to just do next on here. And it defaults to letting Access add a primary key. So now we have a new ID field, which is not in the Excel file, and we don't want that. So we're going to say choose my own primary key, and it's going to default to the category ID. So we already have a numeric category ID that we can use as the primary key field. And we're going to do next. And we're going to just append the name of it. So it wants to name it based on the Sheet tab in Excel. So just categories. Well, before that, I'm going to do TBL prefix. So we have consistency in our naming convention. And I'm going to finish. We're not going to save the import steps. So we have other sheets in that Excel file. And I'm going to have you bring them in and create the tables for you on your own. So I'm going to have you create the next 3 tables on your own by bringing them in from Excel. And that would be for the Order Details Sheet tab, the Orders Sheet tab, and the Products Sheet tab from that same Excel file. Make sure you name them using the 3-character TBL prefix. If you forget to do that when you're working through the steps, you can always right-click in your navigation pane to rename an object. So you should now have the Order Details, Orders, and Products tables in your navigation pane. I did not let Access create the primary key for me. For Order Details table, I use the Order Detail ID as the primary key. For the Orders table, I use the Order ID. And for the Products table, I use the Product ID. And the Product ID is actually a pre-existing code. So a lot of times a product ID, if it was, it could be the product SKU, something that's already existing. So you wouldn't want that to be an auto number field. So we did that with the product ID field here. If I look at the products table in datasheet view, you can see those product IDs are codes of a sort. And we want to use those codes instead of creating an auto number code. So once you create new tables by importing from Excel, you're going to want to review in design view, you're going to want to review the data types and field properties for those newly created tables. So we're going to start on the products table. And before we change any of the properties, let's go to datasheet view and look at the way the information came in. So we have our product IDs, product names, prices, currency, that's good. Product manual has zeros and ones there, right? Even though it's showing that it's a short text field, for some reason it's populating as zeros and ones. And the reason why it's doing that, I'm going to show you in the Excel file. It has zeros and ones for product manual, and they made those into text instead of numbers. So we're going to deal with that in design view. We're going to fix a few things. So I'm going to just go back to design view for the products table. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to just go down the list, right? I'm good with the product ID being the primary key field. For the product name field, I'm going to just do a caption field property so I can have a space between the words, product name. And that's fine as short text. Price is great as currency. That's what it should be. For the product manual, now we'll start with the data type here. We have attachments in the files from the video description that we're going to use for a couple of those products as their manual. So what we want to do is let's attempt to change the data type for product manual from short text to attachment. And it's going to let us know that we cannot do this. You can add a new field instead. So we're going to click OK. And we're going to right click on the category ID row header and choose insert rows. So just like in Excel, you get a row above it. In that new row, we're going to type a field name, and we're just going to call it manual, and we're going to give it the attachment data type. And then we're going to right click on the product manual row header, and we're going to delete that row, and we're going to select yes. So we overcame that issue by creating a new field. You'll see sometimes that happens, especially when you're bringing stuff in from Excel. So we're looking good with our products table. I'm going to go ahead and save my changes. And let's take a look at it in datasheet view again. So now for an attachment data type, notice it gives you the paper clip, right? Even though we named the field manual, it gives you the paper clip icon. So we'll fix that with a caption when we go back in. But in the meantime, we have a couple of attachments that we're going to add. And again, they're in the files from the video description. So we have one for simple cash register and super duper cash register. For super duper cash register, I'm going to click in the attachment field and right click and choose manage attachments. Now I can click add on the right side. And I'm going to add the super duper cash register Word document. And I'm going to click OK. So notice now it has a 1 in the parentheses indicating there's one attachment. Go ahead and add the simple cash register Word document as the attachment for simple cash register. And to view your attachment, you're going to do the same thing. You can click in the attachment field, right click, go back to manage attachments. And with it selected, you can open, and it's going to launch Word. It's in protected view, but there's the Word document. And we're going to do the X to close it. You can also remove an attachment, add more attachments, save as, and save all. I'm going to cancel out of there. The last thing for the products table is to caption the attachment data type. We want to caption it with the word manual so we don't see the paper clip. So go back to design view. I'm already in the manual field, so I'm going to just go down, and for the caption, I'm going to just type the word manual. Press enter, save it, go back to datasheet view, and you can see now instead of the paper clip, it has manual as a column heading. We can go ahead and close the products table, and let's work on our orders table next. Now notice we brought in order IDs. They're in sequential order from the Excel sheet. And let's take this into design view so we can look at our data types and make sure that everything is the way we want it to be. So the first thing we want to do is we want our order IDs to be auto numbered. If we try to change this to auto number, it's going to let us know that we can't do that because there's already data in that field in the table. So if you want to see that error, go ahead and try to change the data type for order ID to auto number, and it'll let you know because there's data in the table. You can't change this data type. So we're going to click OK, and the workaround is to add another field. So we're going to right click the customer ID row header and insert a row. We will call it ID for now, and we're going to make it auto number. And then we're going to right click on the order ID row header and click on primary key so that that field is no longer the primary key field. And by right clicking IDs row header, we're going to make it the primary key. We can go ahead and delete the order ID row and confirm the deletion, and just change the name of the ID field to order ID. And you can go ahead and save and look at it in datasheet view. Because it was sequential, we didn't lose any information. And we're going to go back to design view. The only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to capture order date and ship date fields so that they're in plain English, the space between the words. So go ahead and caption order date and ship date so that the column headings show the way that you're captioning it. And again, you're going to save and take a look in datasheet view to your changes. And we can close the orders table. Okay, so we have our order details table to review next. And I'm looking at it in datasheet view. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to reopen the orders table. So the orders table just contains a unique identifier, the order ID. It has a reference to the customer, order date, and ship date, but it doesn't contain any detail information about the actual orders. So I'm going to close the orders table, and order details is where you get the details of each order. So there's an order detail ID as a unique identifier. It references the order ID, the product ID, and the quantity in this table. Now, if you look at the order detail ID and order ID fields, right, you should never have more than one of those combinations. So in your table, so for example, order detail ID 1 and order ID 1 should only be in the table one time. If you look at order ID 1, so the first order had 2 items in it, right? Order detail ID 1 and order detail ID 2. gives you the products and their quantities. So that combination of order detail ID 1 and order ID 1 should not be repeated in this table. The way to make sure that doesn't happen is instead of having a primary key field, we're going to create a composite ID. Composite ID field is when you have more than one field that serves as a primary key, and any combination of that field can only show in your table one time. And we're going to set that up in Design View. So in Design View, the first thing we're going to do is we want our order detail ID to be an auto number field. And so we can't change it to auto number because the table's already populated. So I'm going to right click on the order ID row header and insert a row. I'm going to temporarily name it just ID, and I'm going to make it auto number. At this point, I'm going to save and just go take a look back in Datasheet View. So you'll see that the numbers in order detail ID and the ID columns are exactly the same. So we can go back to Design View, if I learn how to right click, that is. And so we're going to make the order detail ID field. We don't want it to be a primary key field. And then we're going to delete it and confirm the deletion. We're going to change the name of the ID field to order detail ID. And we're good with that one. So order ID is a number field because it's a foreign key in this table. It's the primary key in the orders table, but a foreign key here, right? Product ID, remember our product IDs are not auto number fields. They're actually short text fields. And quantity is appropriate as a number field. So the only thing we have to do here is create a composite key. So I'm going to right click on the row header for order detail ID and click on primary key. And then I'm going to right click on the order ID and select primary key. And then you say, uh-oh, it only allows you to have one if you do it that way. So it took away the key icon from order detail ID and just has it on order ID. So just right click on order ID and get rid of primary key. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold on the order detail ID row heading and drag down one row so I have both of those fields selected. Now at this point, I'm going to use the ribbon to click on the primary key button, and I'll get the two key icons. You just created a composite key. So any combination of order detail ID and order ID can only show once in your table. And we're going to go ahead and save our table, and we can close it. So now we're going to move into sorting and filtering in a table. So let's go ahead and open up our customers table, and we want it in Datasheet View, so we can just double click it from the navigation pane. And sorting just rearranges your records. So this table is sorted in ascending order by customer ID. That's the default sort that's happening here. And we decide we want it to be arranged by state in ascending order. So we're going to just right click on the state column, and at the very top, we're going to choose Sort A to Z. And now you'll notice that we're sorted by states in ascending alphabetical order. Let's do a different sort in here. Right click on the active, so is the customer active, currently active column, and we're going to sort selected to cleared. So all of the active customers are now at the top of the list. And we'll just take it back to our default sort order. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. If you look up at the ribbon right now on the Home tab, you can see that it has ascending is shaded with that column selected. and we can choose to remove the sort. Removing the sort here clears all the sorts, so we're back in our default sort order of customer ID. Now we're going to move into filtering, which gives you the ability to view just records of interest. So sorting rearranges your records, and filtering can exclude some records from your data set. So there's quite a few ways to filter. Let's say we only want to see our customers who are in California. I'm going to right click in the state field, any state field, and I'm going to choose at the bottom, toward the bottom of the shortcut menu, equals California. There you have it. Now I'm only viewing the 2 rows of interest, customers who are in California. Now there are a couple of visual cues I want to point out. So you realize that you're looking at not your full list of customers, you're looking at a filtered list. So first of all, on the ribbon, on the home tab of the ribbon, your toggle filter button will be shaded. Also, if you look down at your status bar over to the right, it will say filtered. And also where your record navigation tools are at the bottom, that area at the bottom of the screen where it says record 1 of 2, it also says filtered there. And you can get rid of the filter by clicking on filter down there or toggling filter on the ribbon. So when I toggle filter, I get my full list of table records back for the customer's table. Now let's do an opposite filter. We want to see all of our customers who are not in California. So instead of having to filter by all of those individual states, we can right click on any state field that has California in it, rather. I really know how to do this. So I'm going to right click on any California state field, and I'm going to choose does not equal California. And now I have all of the other states that I'm looking at the filtered list for. And I'm going to, just to switch it up, this time I'm going to clear the filter by clicking filter down in the record navigation area. And now I have my full list back. There's another type of filter that I'm going to show you now. And this one we're going to access from the sort and filter group on the ribbon. We're going to go to advanced and we're going to choose filter by form. So we're going to just press delete where it has that criteria in the state field, right? It will carry over criteria from your last filter. So we just want to make sure that that is not filled in. And what we're going to do for city, we're going to do the drop down list and we're going to select Oregon City. And then over for active, we're going to check the box. So we only want to see currently active customers whose address is in Oregon City. And for that one, to make it work now, we're going to just click on toggle filter on the ribbon. And so now we have our result. So there's only one customer, active customer in Oregon City. And sometimes I'll use filter by form if I want to filter by more than one field, which is what we did there. We filtered by city and by active. And I'm going to toggle the filter to get my full list back. And if you look at the 2 Oregon City entries in the list, one isn't currently active and one is not. When we toured the Northwind database, we did look at how the tables in that database were related to each other by using the relationship window. In this lesson, we're going to start by exploring different relation types that are supported in Microsoft Access. We will be using the relationships window. Depending on your prior version of Access, the Add Tables task pane could be a new feature for you. And then we're going to actually create table relationships for our database that we created. So we talked about the one-to-many relationship earlier when we toured Northwind. That is the most common relationship type. An example would be one customer has many orders. So the one side of the relationship would be on the customer table, the many side would be on the orders table. You have a many to many relationship type. It requires a third table, so it actually ends up being two different one to many relationships. So the third table would be known as a junction table. It would typically include the primary key fields from the other two tables, and it could have its own primary key field as well as additional fields in there. So many products are on many orders. Many orders have many products. And then the one-to-one relationship type is not very common. You would use that like one employee has one orientation, one department has one manager, if that is the case. So you have some examples there of those types of relationships. So we're ready to start setting up our table relationships now. And by the way, the PowerPoint presentation I've been showing off and on, it's also included in the files for your video description. So you can reference it for future use anytime you want to. I will guide you through creating the relationships for our database that we're going to want to use. And I'm going to start by closing the customers table. And I'll say yes. Whenever it asks me if I want to save, yes. So to set up your relationships, we're going to go to the Database Tools tab on the ribbon. And in the Relationships group, we're going to click on Relationships. So the relationship window opens. It's currently blank because we don't have any relationships established in our database yet. Now, I mentioned a new feature, the Add Tables pane. That remains open all the time. So it used to be that once you added a table, if you didn't add multiples at the same time, you would have to then redisplay Add Tables. Now that panel stays open on the right side, so it lends itself to further efficiency. So we're going to want all of our tables. So I can hold down my Shift key and click on each table. And then at the bottom of the Add Tables pane, I can click on Add Selected Tables. So now we have our table tiles in the relationship window. And so what I'm going to do is, and it doesn't really matter how they're arranged, but I'm a little bit OCD, so sometimes it does matter to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drag my customers table over to the left. Then I would like to have my orders table, order details, products. Then I'll have categories and employees last. And I can select all of those tiles by drawing a selection net around them. So I'm clicking to the left and slightly above the customer table tile. I'm going to click and hold and just drag a box around all of them. And now that I drag the box around all of them, I can impact them as a group. I mean, I could move them somewhere else or something like that. But anyway, what I would like to do is I'd like to expand the tables, at least so I can see most of the field names in the tables, right? Sometimes you might have fields that start out being named like similarly, but they can change at the end. So I want to make sure I'm seeing all my field names. Take a moment to get that arranged. So personally, I like to have no scroll bars in my table tiles when possible. I mean, we have 6 tables in this database, but I've worked with far more complex databases where you just don't have enough space to have everything expanded in the relationships window like that. but when I can, I do. So I've sized everything. Quick note about the manual field in the products table. When you look at the table tile, it actually has 3 sub entries: the file data, the file name, and the file type. That's where we attached those Word documents, and we use the attachment data type. So now that we can see all of our fields, what we need to do is establish what our common fields are between tables, because we use those to set up the relationship. So this slide will give you the common field between the tables. And, again, the slide deck is in the video description, so you can review it later on your own, but I'll walk you through this. We're going to create all one-to-many relationships, and we're going to do something called cascade updates on all relationships, as you'll see right now. I should mention, if you want more space in your relationships window, you can collapse your navigation pane by using the double arrow, and you can close the Add Tables pane on the right side. If you need it to get it back, it's right there on the Relationship Design tab of the ribbon. So we just have more space. The first relationship we're going to create is between the customers and the employees table. And the common field there is employee ID. Now that's the primary key field in the employees table. And even though it doesn't have the same name in the customers table, that is the common field. It's just called employee there. So what we're going to do is we're going to click and hold on the employee ID field in the employees table tile, and we're going to drag it and drop it onto the employee field in the customers table tile. And the edit relationships dialog box will pop up. Now, I always review that I've got it right. So up at the top, it tells you the table or query, in our case, the employees table and what the field is, and the related table or query, the customers table, and what the matching field is. On the bottom half of this edit relationships dialog box, go ahead and check the box that says enforce referential integrity. And enforcing referential integrity between tables means that it will not allow you to have any orphaned records. For example, you won't have any orders without a customer on them. That would be known as an orphaned record. When you enforce referential integrity, it gives you 2 other options. The first of which is cascade update related fields. So in this example, what this means is that if I update the employee ID field in the employees table, that update will cascade down to the customers table. And so you'll have the same employee ID at all times in both tables. And so we're going to check that box. Now, cascade delete related records requires a little bit more thought, I think. So if I were to delete, say, a customer record, would I want that customer to be erased from all of the orders they placed in the orders table? I probably wouldn't want that to happen. I would want to be able to get a historical view of all orders, whether the customer is no longer a customer of ours at that time. So that leads to a conversation about archiving a table so that you may have an archived customers table with all your old, no longer active customers in it, and don't expect them to be active anymore. Maybe that company went out of business or something of the sort. So you would want to archive that table and then have an unarchived customers table for your current customers, active or maybe temporarily inactive. So we're not going to check cascade delete related records here. Go ahead and click the Create button, and you'll see the join line, it's called. And I can move the employees table instance down so I can see the line a little bit clearer, but that line will never break unless we change something about it. So you'll notice the one that's on the nearest to the employees table tile. That is the one side of the relationship, right? And then you'll notice the infinity symbol on the side of the join line nearest to the customer's table. That's the many side of the relationship. So one employee can service many customers in plain English. We're going to create our second relationship, and it's going to be between the order details and products table. So their common field is product ID. Now, I usually drag the key field. So in this case, I'm going to click and hold on product ID in the products table and drag it and drop it on top of product ID in the order details table. I'm going to check my table information up at the top, enforce referential integrity, cascade update, and notice at the bottom it does show you the type of relationship, one to many. And we're going to go ahead and click create. So we see that join line, one product can be on many order details. Sometimes when you create tables by bringing in data from Excel, it's going to have some glitches that will show up when you get to the relationships window. So I'm going to give you an example of that. Let's attempt to create a relationship between the customers and the orders table. And so the related field there would be customer ID. I'm going to drag the primary key customer ID onto the foreign key customer ID in the orders table. I'm going to enforce referential integrity, cascade update, and create. And we get this error message. Relationship must be on the same number of fields with the same data types. So we click OK and we cancel. Now the other tables that we're going to have relationships with are also going to have that same error. I'm only going to show the error once, but this is good for you to know how to fix these types of things when they come up. And again, it's usually related to bringing in data from an outside data source, like we did with several of our tables. So we're going to go up to the Relationships Design tab on the ribbon and close, and it's going to ask us to save our changes, and we're going to say yes. Before I walk you through how to resolve these relationship errors you get when you're trying to create relationships, we're going to change a setting in Access to make it easier for us to work through these issues. So let's go to the File tab, and all the way at the bottom on the left, we're going to click on Options. And on the left side, it's already on the Current Database tab. So far, every time we open up an object, every time we open up multiple tables, they display on multiple tabs. So the default setting is Tab Documents. For what we're getting ready to do, it'll be easier if we have overlapping windows. So select the Overlapping Windows option button and click OK. And it's going to tell you that you're going to have to close and reopen your database for that option to take effect. We're going to do OK. And we're going to go back to the File tab and choose Close. And then back to the File tab. And we should have our customer orders right there under Recent. And we're going to reopen it. And then I'm going to expand my navigation pane. Now that we've done that, we're going to resolve the error between the customers and the orders table. So in the navigation pane, I'm going to right click on TBL customers, and I'm going to choose Design View. And notice it's like in its own tab, it's its own document window here. So I'm going to resize this document window. I'm interested in just seeing the fields and their data types. And then in the navigation pane, I'm going to right click on the orders table, and I'm going to open that in design view as well and arrange that one so it's on the other side, so I can actually see design view of both tables at the same time. This will make it easier for what we need to do. And I'm actually going to expand customers table just a little bit so I can see more of those properties. So if we look at this, we have our customer ID field in the customers table, and that is an auto number field. And in the orders table, it is a short text field, so a different data type. So remember, when your primary key field is auto number, the foreign key in another table has to have the number data type. So we need to change that. But before we do, let's right-click on the orders window and go to datasheet view. So we see that even though the field is called customer ID, it's actually showing the customer name. So I'm going to go back to design view for the orders table. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the customer ID field from the short text data type to the number data type. Once we go to switch back to datasheet view, it's going to tell us we have to save our table. We're going to say yes. And it's going to let us know that some data may be lost. So it's going to wipe out all of those customer names. And I'll show you the proper way to get them to display in the table. We have to have matching data types here. So we're going to continue anyway by clicking yes. And then it lets you know it encountered errors and 30 records were deleted. We're going to proceed anyway. So now it takes me back to datasheet view, and notice we have the customer ID column, but it doesn't contain anything. Now, the moral to this story is these types of error are caused when you bring in data from Excel. So if I were setting up my data in Excel and I know that this is an error that's caused, I would use the customer ID in the customer ID field in the Excel sheet instead of the customer name, because I'm going to have that data stored in another table, which is the customers table. So I don't need the redundancy in Excel. But because we do have redundancy, we're going to have to fill in the appropriate customer IDs here in this datasheet view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maximize the orders table. So I'm just focused on that one. And I'm going to just call out the numbers every time I type in a number. So I'm in the first customer ID field. I'm going to type in a number, down arrow, type in a number, down arrow, all the way down to order ID 30. So I'm in the first customer ID field for order ID 1. And I'm going to type the number 1 and my down arrow. So remember, once you leave the row, it's saving that record. Your next number is also a 1, down arrow. We're going to do the first 5 together, and then mine is going to miraculously autofill. My screen is going to be zoomed in a little bit, and you'll be able to type in the rest of the numbers on your own by pausing the video. So our third number here is a 6, down arrow, 7, down arrow, 6, down arrow. So again, just pause the video. The highlighted row is where you're going to be starting on your own, all the way down to the bottom row. When you're ready, resume. So what we've just done would fix that error we got when we tried to create the relationship because they didn't have matching data types between the order and the customer's table. But really in our orders table, we don't want to see the actual customer ID number. We do want to see the company name. So I'm going to just go back to my restore button, the bottom restore button in the upper right corner. And for my orders table, I'm going to switch it back to design view. And so we change customer ID to the number data type so that it matches the auto number data type in terms of our relationship. But now we want it to show a different field. So what we're going to do, and this is not going to change that data type from number. We're going to go to the drop down next to number, and all the way at the bottom, we're going to choose Lookup Wizard. And I want the lookup field to get the values from another table or query. We're going to click on Next. We want to select TBL Customers and Next. And we're going to choose the Customer ID field so I can double click it. And I'm also going to double click Company Name. And we're going to do Next. We're not going to do a sort order here, so just Next again. And this one, it's going to hide the key column, which is recommended. So even though we selected customer ID, it is not going to show the customer ID in that table field. So here's the list of company names, and we can scroll down and make sure the column is wide enough to display all of them. And we're going to do Next. We're going to just ignore this screen and click Finish. So when you're doing a lookup field for a data type, it creates a relationship. We're going to say yes, we need to save the table so that the relationship is created. And we're going to go ahead and close. Well, actually, let's switch to Datasheet view so we can see that. So now we told it to look up, based on the customer ID, look up the company name and display that in the table. Now let's go and see if we can create our relationship. And we're going to close the orders table. If it asks you to save any layout changes, say yes. We're going to go back to Database Tools tab of the ribbon and back into Relationships. And now you'll see that there is a join line between customers and orders. That's because we created a lookup field between the two tables, but there's not a 1 or an infinity symbol on that line. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on that join line, and then you can right click and choose Edit Relationship. We're going to enforce referential integrity and cascade update, and we're going to click OK. So it's only when you enforce referential integrity that you get the 1 and infinity symbols on the line. So now we see one customer can have many orders. And that was a process, but we have to do it for some more tables as well. So you don't need to do this, you can just watch, but we're going to have a different type of problem trying to create a relationship between the orders table and the order details table based on the order ID field. So I'm going to just demonstrate this. I'm going to drag order ID from orders to order details order ID, enforce, cascade, and create. So we're getting that same message that we got before, but this fix is going to be a little bit different than what we just did. So I'm going to just back out of there. I'm going to close my relationships window and save the changes and display my navigation pane. This time I'm going to reopen the orders table in design view, and I don't need my navigation pane to be that wide. And I'm going to open the order details table in design view as well, and just rearrange them so I can see them one on either side of the other, which is when you want to use this kind of option, is when you want to be able to compare data. When you have the tabs, you aren't able to do that. You can switch from one tab to the other, but you can't do this, what we're doing now, and it makes it a lot easier. So we're focused on the order ID field. I'm in the orders table, and that field is auto number. Any auto number field, if you look down at the field properties, it automatically makes it a long integer in terms of the field size. So any auto number field is automatically a long integer in terms of its field size. we changed, well, order ID in this table is a number, right? We did make it a number field so that it matches the auto number from its primary key in the other table. But if you look down at the field size, it is not a long integer, it's double. You're going to get the same error message for two different reasons. So I'm doing the drop down to the right of double for the order details table, and I'm changing it to long integer. And I'm going to close both tables. When I close order details, it should prompt me to save my changes. And I'm going to say yes. It's letting me know that some data may be lost. Now, this is not going to make a difference because the order IDs are not really large numbers or anything. So we're going to continue anyway by saying yes. Now, if I look in order details, if I just open it, I'll see that the order IDs are still there. So that message did not impact the order IDs. And I'll close it again. Now we can go to our Database Tools tab, Relationships, and I'm going to drag Order ID from the Orders table on top of Order ID in the Order Details table, enforce referential integrity, cascade update related fields, and create. And there I have my other relationship. We're going to have a similar error if we go to create the relationship between the categories and the products table. So let's just let's close our relationships window. And we're going to open our categories table in design view and resize it so it's on one side of your screen. And let's open the products table in datasheet view and just resize it. Okay, so if you notice in here, in the products table, the category ID field is showing the actual name of the category. So this is going to be the same fix that we had to do when we first started out between, I believe it was the orders and customers table. So we're going to have to do the same fix here. Let's change our products table to design view as well. So in the categories table, you'll notice the category ID field is a number field. They are in sequential order. It really should be an order auto number field in case we add more numbers. So we're going to address that first, but then in the products table, category ID is short text. That's why it's showing the name, but we have to set that up as a proper lookup field. So let's start with the category ID. Because it's populated, let's try to change it to auto number here. And it's going to let us know that we can't do it. So our workaround is I'm going to right click on the category row heading and insert a row, temporarily call it ID, and give it the auto number data type. And then I'm going to delete the category ID field, which is also the primary key field. I'm going to say yes and yes. I'm going to rename ID to category ID. And make it the primary key field. So now I'm going to switch the categories table to datasheet view. It's going to prompt me to save. And so they were in the same exact order as they were before, but now it's an auto number field. So that's part one. I'll just switch it back to design view. Now in the products table, we're going to change category ID to a number field, and we're going to save, or actually switch it to datasheet view, and it'll prompt you to save. It's going to let us know some data may be lost, so it's going to wipe out all of the category names that are there. We're going to say yes and yes again. And we have to manually put them in. Well, this time we don't have as extensive a list as we did for those 30 orders that we had to populate. So I'm going to go ahead and populate these category IDs, zoom in my screen, and then you'll be able to put them in your table as well. So you can just pause the video and get your category IDs in, and then resume when you're ready. So the next step, and I'm going to just restore my windows, I'm going to take my products table back to design view, and I'm going to create that lookup field for the category ID field. So it actually does show the category name. So I'm going to the drop down next to number for the data type for the category ID field, going back to lookup wizard. We're going to leave the default setting here and do next. We are going to select, and it's already selected, the categories table. So we're going to do next. This time we're just going to select the category. We're not going to select the ID field, just category. Next, no sort order again. And here we have our categories. So we're going to do next, and then we're going to finish. And then it's going to create that relationship, which we're going to modify. We're going to say yes here. And if we switch to datasheet view, you'll see that we have the category names in the field instead of the category ID. We did it the proper way. So again, when you're setting up your data in Excel, think about including, you could include the category ID in your data, definitely. And if you have a need in Excel to see the names of the category, create the category name field in there as well. When you're importing the data, remember, you can skip fields. So you would only want to import category ID, not category name, because it has to be set up through a lookup wizard. Now we can go ahead and close this table. Make sure all your tables are closed. And if it asks you to save any changes, say yes. We're going to go back to Database Tools, Relationships, and now we'll be able to create this last relationship here, or actually modify it. So you'll see that we have the relationship, the join line between products and categories. I'm going to select that join line, right click, edit relationship. We just want to enforce referential integrity and cascade update related fields, and go ahead and click OK. So it was a journey, but we have got here. We have our relationships created. So why do you create relationships? Well, that's why it makes it a relational database, but also it controls the data you get when you query your database. If the customers table and the orders table are not related to each other, it would be hard to just pull the orders for a particular customer, for example. So our relationships are set in stone here. We can go ahead and close our relationships window. Say yes to saving the changes. Soon as I had us close the relationships window, I forgot there was one other thing I wanted to tell you. So I'm going to go back to Database Tools, Relationships, and I'm going to just organize these a little bit different. So we created, all the relationships we created are one-to-many relationships. But one of these relationships is actually a many-to-many relationship. So much earlier, I mentioned that the many-to-many relationship requires 3 tables. It's actually 2 separate one-to-many relationships. And the third table is known as the junction table. So, and I said that the junction table typically contains the primary key fields from the other tables, the other 2 tables, and it could also have its own primary key field. So our order details table is in a many-to-many relationship with the orders table and the products table. Well, let me restate that. I said it wrong. The order details table is the junction table. So the orders table is in a many-to-many relationship with the products table. If you notice the order details table, it has its own primary key. It actually has a composite key. But it also has the order ID foreign key, the product ID foreign key, and I said it can have other fields. So that's where we decided to put the quantity field in that table. This is the junction table. So many orders can have many products. Many products can be on many orders. So that is, in fact, a many-to-many relationship with this as your junction table. Now I can go ahead and close the relationships window. So when we first started Module 1, I told you that we were going to start creating queries in this module. That was an error on my part. We're actually going to start those in the next module. So just to recap what we did cover in this extensive module, we started by getting the Northwind database from the template in Access and reviewing all of the database objects that were in there. Along the way, we reviewed the Access environment, and it just kind of gave you an introduction to the concepts of a relational database. After that, we talked about how important planning is before creating a new database, and then we created a database from a blank template. After that, we talked about how to plan and set up your database tables. And then we created database tables manually and also by importing them from an Excel file that was in the video description. After we did all of that, we populated our tables. We brought in the information either from Excel, and you could also manually populate your tables. We moved on to how to sort and filter table data, and then we spent a fair amount of time on creating table relationships, and we had to fix some relationship errors with tables before we could create those relationships. Thank you so much for attending this video course.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget we also offer live classes in Office applications, professional development, and private training. Visit learnit.com for more details. Please remember to like and subscribe and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for choosing Learnit.